head of the Assembly Education Committee, and this is the first day of the 2026 Regents interviews. Section 202 of the Education Law provides for the election by the legislature of members of the Board of Regents. Now, there are a total of 17 regents, 13 by judicial district and 4 at large. And today we are interviewing for judicial district 5 and at-large vacancies. There is 1 at-large vacancy. The law further provides that the regents must be elected by concurrent resolution of the legislature or by joint session of the legislature. The Board of Regents oversees the entire educational enterprise of the state of New York. The board's most prominent role is setting learning standards for elementary and secondary education. But the Board of Regents also regulates 56 licensed professions and registers academic programs at all colleges and universities, including SUNY and CUNY. Also within the purview of the Board of Regents are public libraries, museums, historical societies, the state library, the state archives, public broadcasting, vocational rehabilitation, and the regulation of proprietary vocational schools. The Board of Regents derives its authority from the New York State Constitution and education law. Specifically, Section 207 of the Education Law grants the board power to exercise legislative functions concerning educational policies and to establish rules for implementing those policies. So today we have right now the first person that we are going to interview. But before we do, let me introduce the people here at the table. Okay, to my right, okay, my immediate right, we have Chairman of the Assembly Higher Education Committee, Alicia Hyman. Next to her, going towards the right, there is State Senator Shelley Mayer, who is chairperson of the Senate Education Committee. And at the end of the table is State Senator Toby Stavitsky, who is chairperson of the Senate Higher Education. To my left, we have the ranking member of the State Assembly Education Committee. Sitting in for the ranker, Mr. Smith, who's not here today, couldn't be here, but he has sent his able assistant, Assemblyman Sam Pirazzolla. Okay. With that mouthful, okay, we turn it over to you. The procedure will simply be, we'll give you about 5 minutes or so. You don't have to take all 5 minutes, just to tell us about yourself, things that might qualify you or you think qualifies you to be a regent, and to just tell us about yourself, okay? After those 5 minutes, we will take time here and ask you a couple questions about your view of the regents and education in the state of New York, okay? Basically, just look on it as a conversation back and forth, okay? So, our first person who is we're interviewing for regents is Ms. Esther Yang. Ms. Yang, we welcome you, and the floor is now yours, ma'am.
Ah, I'm so sorry. Now I'm louder than I expected. But anyway, as a single mother and the former PTA president at my daughter Title I public school, I have a very deep understanding of the difficulty faced by the voiceless of single parent and also immigrant. My daughter is now a science teacher in a public school, my proud moment. And her success is largely due to the support from her teachers, the community, and the amazing state of New York. I was also adopted by a wonderful Caucasian family who welcomed my 7 brothers and me. That's true, 7 brothers, all 8 of us. And so that we could stay here legally. My father was a police officer. My mother was a retired General Motor. My parents always saw my brothers and I as one family and one race, never referring to us as like their adopted children. They always introduced me or all my brothers, or meet my daughter Esther. That kindness made me feel like I genuinely belong. I know that I'm a little bit emotional, like I think of them, and I sit here as a way of my debt of gratitude to them. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share the love and from their love and to pay it forward. Sadly, my dad passed away from cancer, and my mom passed away from dementia. Because of my father's fought with cancer due to maybe he overworked himself at the Navy or as a police officer, but no, nevertheless, I'm thankful to be able to co-author the Patients' Bills of Right for Bellevue Hospital. I became a yoga, meditations, and a 4th degree black belt, and because I believe self-care is very important, and I become a health and wellness and education's advocate because people just don't know sometimes. And I also owe my presence here to the support of my community who helped me raise my daughter. I couldn't afford an after-school program for my daughter. I founded Super Happy Healthy Kids, a safe haven for kids. I volunteer my time so we could put all the money back to the kids and to form a life so that the kids understand the investment of time to become lifelong friends. My parents were my #1 fan, and I wanted the kids to also feel what it's like to be a #1 fan. You know, I'm a trained psychotherapist, a core energetic psychotherapist, and one thing that I remember sitting down with my supervisor talking about clients, and she said to me, she said, well, you gotta slow it down because how would you explain what a strawberry tastes like if they don't know what strawberry tastes like? So I am extremely grateful for my parents to make me feel wanted and loved and feeling that, hey, I'm your #1 fan no matter what. And they're not even my real parents. They were my adopted parents and from a different race. And so Super Happy Health Kids work closely with parents, teachers, PTAs, so the community can experience a sense of support and belonging. This is my way of giving back after so many people contributed to raising my daughter into the wonderful person that she is today. I've had the joy of serving as a former member for several business improvement districts for Chinatown, NoHo, Soho, and also Madison Avenue. I used to work for the former controller, Senator John, he's now Senator John Liu. And he also believed advocate for family, community, educations, and of course our amazing New York State. I've had the honor of presenting at Cornell Medical School for Mind Body Medicine, and I also established a yoga school and in partnership with Yoga Alliance. I'm dedicated to improving New York in a way that enhances public trust and our ability to create a lasting impact. Once again, I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve. My daughter's teacher were her biggest supporters. I am committed to being New York residents' biggest supporter to ensure that educators and school leaders receive the backing, trust, and empowerment they need to lead effectively. So I don't think it's just about the student, but it's also the backstory. My vision like that of everyone here and everybody in New York State, to create an environment where students thrive, teachers are valued, families feel welcome, and communities grow stronger. So that ultimately we all succeed together, because that's what my parents always taught me: figure it out how you can win together. With 8 kids, we're always fighting, something is not always right, so they always said, figure it out, win together. All of us love New York more than ever. It is with great honor that I stand before you today. Thank you for this opportunity to serve and for your thoughtful considerations.
Ms. Yang, thank you very much for that. You have one daughter?
I have one daughter. She's
How old?
26.
26?
I know.
God bless you. God bless you.
26.
Yeah, I've had 2 daughters, and wow.
And sassy.
Okay, thank you. We have a common, yes. Listen, let us begin our questioning, and we'll start with Senator Shelley Mayer.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to hear you speak so honestly about your past and your daughter and what you want to contribute. I appreciate that very much. So, have you ever, I want to get a sense of what you know about being a regent and the Board of Regents. And so to that end, have you ever either been to a meeting of the Board of Regents or watched online a meeting of the Board of Regents?
I've watched online because I think the regions are very important because they kind of set the template
Yes.
for all of us, right? So that's really the key.
Right.
And being able to have the 17 and the at-large to kind of get along together.
Yes. So besides their role in kindergarten through grade 12 education, and Senator Savitsky and Assemblywoman Hyman will ask about this, they have many other licensing duties. Are you familiar with sort of the very broad role of the Board of Regents in dealing with some of these other issues besides just what happens K through 12?
I do, because we're trying to figure out how to license yoga. So I've worked with Yoga Alliance, and they have like 100,000 members. And so I do understand the complexity of licensing.
Okay. And with respect to your involvement, it looked like you were in the PTA in a school in Staten Island, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what other role have you had in the New York City public school community?
Well, I sit on Community Board 6, 8, 3, and 1. So I've worked with a lot of community. I've been an advocate for 30 years. I represented, at that time, Controller John Liu for the community board, so I go to the meeting all the time. Super Happy Healthy Kids are on site for the run after school for four schools. And so I meet a lot with all the CEC, from 1 to the many for the 5 boroughs in the city. And I work very closely with all the PTAs in New York City.
When you sat on those community boards, that was as a representative of the comptroller's office?
Yeah, and I also, like I said, I'm an advocate. So I know all the chairs, and we talk about things, we have dinner together, and I know like all of us want nothing better for New York to be better.
And the Super Happy Healthy Kids, which is what you started and you run.
Yes, ma'am.
It's in, how many schools did you say it's in?
5.
5? And where are those schools?
They're in District 1 because it's Lower East Side and Chinatown. I live on the Upper East Side, but they don't need me kind of there. But I think the Lower East Side is in a hot zone because they have not recovered since 9/11. So I felt that they needed our love and support the most there.
Are they after school, before and after school, or just after school program?
It's an after-school program, and whatever the principal would like us to do. Like, we work very closely with the principal. So they need us to do the morning, the pick up, to delivery, whatever it is. We just there as a partner to help them. We also work with DYCD to do the basketball, to do the soccer, whatever that's needed, that available, that's appropriate, and that in partnership. And our main focus is kind words, kind act. And if you look at my website, it's about like changing the world for the better, one child at a time. I mean, I was the receiving end that My parents always into us. They always there when they're home, and if they're not home, they will write a note. So I think it's for myself, and this is not whether as a board or not as a board, this is just myself, how my parents raised me to be a good human being and to just make sure that the next person feel that they're loved and wanted.
Understood. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yang. Just looking over your information, and from what you said, you've watched some of the regent's procedures online. What committee would you see yourself on if you were selected to be a regent?
If I would have to choose just one, I would just put education. If I would have to put just two, then I would put health and wellness or anything to do in that range, or whatever else that's needed.
One of the things that the Regents is responsible for, obviously, is the licensing professions. And you said you're aware because of the yoga license that you've been trying to see if you could get that to be a profession in New York. There are 52 professions that exist now. Why would you think yoga should be a licensed profession in the state of New York?
I have mixed feelings, right? Assemblymember Harvey Epstein is actually, I don't know if any of you know that, he's a certified yoga teacher.
He's now a city council member.
Now he's a city council member. And so he said, doesn't need to be licensed. But then, I don't know, it's like I'm back and forth with it. And like I said, I work very closely with Yoga Alliance, so there's like over 100,000 members. Simple Healthy Living, which also I founded in the original, is it's a yoga school. And so I think to answer your questions, we still need to do a lot more research and a lot more talk, a lot of more communications about it. Does it help just to license? I don't know, like part of our work for Simple Healthy Living is to create a certifications program, honestly, to do it for veterans or for domestic violence victims, right? So that they can have a plan B career options. So will that help if they be licensed? Because I remember when massage therapist was not licensed, when Swedish Institute. So we go back and forth, and we haven't found the right answer for you. And so, but I know today, my team and I are thinking, what else can we do to help the economy? And maybe we can train domestic violence victim about yoga, because like Super Happy Healthy Kids and Simple Healthy Living are both authorized training license provider for American Red Cross. So we're saying, okay, maybe we can do that, but so not sure. Like we still need to do research and conversations and thinking and talking and dialogue and reason things out.
Okay. My last question. There are about 7,000 public and private elementary and secondary schools in the state of New York. And being a regent, you set policy for the entire state. What is the one pressing, or if you had to pick the top 3 pressing issues for children in the state of New York that the regent should focus on, what would those be for you?
I think for me, I would love to meet all the leaders and then ask them, what is it that you don't feel that we're not supporting you? I think that's the first thing, because I know that for myself, that for our Super Happy Healthy Kids, our value is that we ask the teachers, because I believe happy teachers is equal to happy students. Happy students thrives. So I think if I would get this position, I would talk to all of them. Whether they're not kind to me, or whatever it is the situation is. My dad always taught me that you give kindness to the undeserving. So I'm open to talk to all the people and make myself available. And then from there, maybe we can put all our heads together to see what would be the best interest for the kids. But I think to just say, I want this for these kids, it's not gonna work, because it's gonna be half-assed. So I think if we talk to the backstories and working with the unions and everybody else, so it's like one thing that my dad told me, maybe because he was a cop, but being like, what is it that we have to do to win together? Maybe because me having 8 brothers and being thrown away like a football, that it like, how is it that we can be together as a family to win together? So I don't consider it's, District 1 is my favorite child and this is my stepchild. I think if I'm given this position, you can't play favorites. You got to be fair to everybody. And then you got to work with your 17 people and the 5 extras one, and everybody got their own backstory and issue, right? I mean, I'm a psychotherapist, so everybody got their baggages. So we got to figure out how we can be able to sweet talk everybody and then win.
Senator Stravinsky.
There we go. Thank you for coming up to Albany and for your interest in
Thank you,
serving
Senator.
as a regent. As was described a couple of minutes ago by Assemblymember Benedetto, the regents set policy for New York State. And that is a very broad mission that is outlined in our state constitution and in the statute. The governor released her executive budget, I think it was on the 13th of January. Have you had a chance to take a look at that and see the relationship between the regents, the state education department, and her budget allocation?
I didn't really look into details about it, but again, I would like first and foremost to personally just, if I'm given this opportunity, to just work not just with the elementary and the middle school, but also CUNY and SUNY leadership, and also to the libraries and the licensing, all the 56 of them, right? And to see how I can perform better, and then allocate and figure out the budget, or maybe there isn't no budget, because you can't take money out of no money. So, and then that's something that everybody needs to talk to the governor and being able to figure it out, because there's only so much in the pie that you can split, and everybody, like coming in here, this one wants this one, that one wants this one. Everybody's important. So it's, I think like the same thing like my mentioning about yoga, it's about balancing and then being able to work with, if we need more money, then I'm sure I will make an appointment and figure it out with the rest of my team member to how we can do that. But also understanding with explaining to the leaders that if there's no money to be had, there's no money to be split. And then if not, how can we do it to make it better? Like Super Happy Healthy Kids run on 0 funding from city, state, and federal. This is, we did it. And our report with the IRS since 2014, we've donated over $1 million. And we created a space that for people that cannot afford us, for family that cannot afford us, and we gave that. And because Senator John Liu, even though I used to work with him, he'll just say, get out of my office. I'm not going to give you $1 million. That would be crazy. Even City Council member Harvey Epstein would say the same thing. I know you, Esther, we love you. No, we don't have that kind of money. So I'm saying is like, I think there's many different opportunity in different ways. My grandmother was an herbalist, my Chinese grandmother, that I always learn from yoga and everything else that you make your poison into your medicine. And I did not have money for after school for my daughter, so I founded one. And now I give it away. You don't have to have money to come to my after school, and we're an incredible after school. We serve certified organic fruits. We do yoga and meditations. We do everything else. We do karate, we do swimming, and we do a lot of activities because health and wellness and obesity and asthma, eventually it's going to cost us money, not just not just us, but in the long run for Medicare and everything else and housing. So it's important. Early child development is key. And so to answer your questions about budget, if we don't have the money, we'll figure out, strategize, and how to make New York happier and healthier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Pirizzola.
Good morning, Ms. Yang. How are you today?
Morning.
Thank you for coming up on such a cold day, although I just looked, it's actually downright balmy. It's 25 degrees.
Not as cold as last week, so I'm happy.
I was, just to let you know, I'm a native Staten Islander in PS 16.
Yes.
I attended a preschool program there when I was a baby, I guess is what we could say. There are a lot of schools in New York City, so I'm going to talk about that. I was also a board member on the Community Education Council. A lot of our schools have difficulty with students taking standardized tests where the passing rate for reading and math is literally 90 to 95% of the school are not considered, at those grade levels. Do you have any strategies, or would you be willing to say what we have been doing now obviously doesn't work, we have to incorporate something else?
I know I can tell you at Super Happy Healthy Kids, we actually were very proud. Our kids average 90 and higher. And how do we do it? We tell them to relax. We tell them that forget the test. Just exhale. Just exhale more than you inhale, because if not, you get dizzy. So I use my yoga method and karate method to teaching these kids and training my team that whatever they said is not important. What's important is you, and you exhale. So I think if my belief system or my value, that we focus on the backstory, we focus on the kids itself, and we focus on what is it about them that they're not absorbing, and then we can go from there. That's how I believed in, and I know that from our kids' perspective, we make homework fun. I said, like for my pre-K, I said, if you count to 10, I'll give you a jewel. And if you count to 10 Japanese, I'll give you 3. So this is my dad way of thinking. If all else fails, he said, we'll bribe them in a healthy way. We also Super Happy Healthy Kids, which is very, very unique in itself. We don't serve sugar. We don't eat sugar. And that was very, very hard sell for the principal in the beginning. So now everybody wants us. We have a wait list that want us to be there, but we just can't right now. So we have no sugar. We serve organic fruits. We serve unlimited spring water, and we have no funding from city, state, and federal. And we just work our behind off to make things happen. And we've donated over $1 million. But to go back to your questions, how do you make people study better? I think parents has a lot to do with it, because we don't know their backstory, if they hate each other, they love each other, or maybe the kids just being kids, they don't want to do homework. And that's okay. So the way that we set up for our after school, we tell them, here's the homework, I don't make the rules, you do it till 3:15, you finished it early, yay, but we'll help you one-on-one, and small group helps, because our priority is 8 students per teacher, and sometimes we do one-on-one. But we make it fun. We make it like their number one fan. Like, hey, this is wrong, what's going on? So I think we just have to, like in the beginning of my strawberry story, it's like, I think we just have to slow it down. I think we should just forget, look, Switzerland have no homework, and they turn out to be okay. I think sometimes we put so much pressure in our standardized tests. My humble opinion, of course. But we do what we do, and I believe if we focus on one child at a time, like my value at my team, and we have 65 people working for Super Happy, and we just tell them, clone and repeat. We clone and repeat. And we make the older kids be their reading buddy, and that's what we do. So my second grader read to the first grader, and second grader, of course, get nervous. I can't do it. I said, trust me, they don't know how to read, so it'll be all good. So you can just make it up as you go. So we have, that's what we did, and we have reading buddy, we have math buddy, we do tutorial, because we put our kids actually together for a lot of reasons, because the younger kids need to understand the older kids, and the older kids forget they were once young. They need to learn patience back. That's how we did it, and it seems to be working for us.
I just want to ask you one other question. What is your feeling on keeping specialized high schools?
That's a very hard question, considering that I'm Asian and I'm Asian overachiever. I don't think there should be I have mixed feelings, and I'm going to be hit from one corner and hit from the other corner, but I think that we should just eliminate everything. I think we should start from focusing on each child at a time. I think that testing puts so much pressure on the kids. Homework puts so much pressure on the kids. But I also understand one of our school is Nest, and that's a very competitive school. And the other school is PS 184, which is dual language school, and that's also competitive. So I have to follow where the rules are, where they do a lot of homework. But to answer your questions, genuinely, if this is my world, I say, let kids be kids. You know?
To be clear, I think you said you would eliminate specialized high schools?
Like I said, it's a very hard decision, like the same thing with the yoga. You know, I know how I get into studying physics and calculus. My mother just drilled into me. No homework, no nothing, you do this and you do this and you do this only. Not my Caucasian family, my biological, my Chinese mother. That's all we do. We do nothing but nothing. But would I raise my daughter like that? No. I can tell you how I raised my daughter. I don't know how to answer your question, to be honest with you. I can tell you how I do it. I told my daughter since 4 years old, you get 85 and higher, I would never, ever, ever check your homework. You get 85 below, I will breathe in your neck the way Apo raised me and my grandmother. There will be no TV, there will be nothing for you. So your call. And you know, she graduated with a master's from Bard. She went to Harvard School. She went to PS 16 from Title I to PS 35, to Bard, to Harvard School, to teaching science at high school for Columbia University. I never, and I tell parents this because they get nervous with homework. I said, I can't, you gotta do your own thing. But I can tell you how I raised my daughter. It works. And this is how I do it with the forced school. I tell parents, please, just let them be. And I tell my kids, I call them my kids. I tell them, you do you, all right? You get 90, I give you a jewel. And you can go pick a present, like little presents, like under $3. But you do you, okay? And so I find that value works. But again, I don't know how to answer your questions because some parents believe that unless you go to Harvard, they'll get these own. You know, my nephew graduated from Harvard, my niece graduated from Cornell, but everybody's different. And so I don't want to raise them. I'm not going to complain about the way my brother raised their children, but I know how I want to raise my daughter. I want her to have a happy childhood. I want her to not make exams the important things, and their life is short, and I want her to just be happy. And I trust that if she's happy, the whole world is happy. And that's how she does. She's doing it in her school as a science teacher. She just said, Mom, I'm pretty chill. My kids love me. And they call her professor because, I don't know, that's Columbia University thing. But she said, I'm so chill, Mom. Thank you for being a chill mother. So I don't know how to answer your questions because there are a lot of parents that have different idea of that unless the children go to Cornell, they'll jump off the bridge, you know? And I'm not, so it's different. Personally, my only thing I want is my daughter's happiness because I trust that will blossom into something else. Super Happy Healthy Kids, that's why it's called Super Happy Healthy Kids, are for that reason. And it just, I raised them, you know, by some sort of, I don't know, miracle that they all get 90 without me pressuring them. So I wish I have the better answer for you, but I could just say I never check my daughter's homework.
It's a good answer. Thank you very much, Ms. Yang. We thank you for presenting yourself here before us, okay? Traveling up to Albany, I know on a day like today and everything, it's not the easiest thing in the world, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate the candidness of your answers. We will be notifying you in the near future as to your status, but we appreciate you being here.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
honored and humbled. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Bye-bye.
Good morning to all. I humbly and
Mr.
sincerely
Francis, we
apologize.
welcome you here, sir.
Sir.
Just sit back and relax. My name is Michael Benedetto. I'm chairman of the State Assembly Education Committee. And sitting with me to my immediate right and going over is Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman, who is chairperson of the Higher Education Committee in the Assembly. Sitting next to her is State Senator Shelley Mayer, who's Education Chairman of the State Senate. And at the end of the table is Senator Toby Savinsky, who is chairperson of the Higher Education Committee of the Senate. To my immediate left is Assemblyman Sam Pirizzola, okay, who's the ranker or representing the ranker on the Assembly Education Committee. We welcome you, sir. We know you've been waiting for a long time, so thank you for that. We're going to give you about 5 minutes or so. You don't have to take all 5 minutes, just to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you should be a member of the Regents and what you think of the Regents and your opinions there. After which, we'll ask a few questions of you. However, we just want you to relax if you can and take it as it goes, and we'll have a nice conversation here. Okay, so Mr. Francis, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you and good morning to the chairs and members of the Assembly and Senate Education and Higher Education Committees for the opportunity to appear here today. I want to sincerely apologize. It is unprecedented that I'm having some tire pressure monitoring sensor issues replaced two about a week ago, and they still can't figure it out. So I sincerely apologize. I prepared a short just introduction, opening statement. If the board pleases, I would like to just go through that quick. Yes, yes, thank you. All right. So again, I am honored to be considered for the service as a regent of the University of the State of New York. I come to this role with a deep respect for regents' constitutional responsibility to safeguard the integrity, accessibility, and long-term strength of New York's education system from early childhood through higher education, professional licensure, and lifelong learning. My interest in serving as a regent is rooted in public service and accountability. I believe strongly that education is the foundation of equity, workforce readiness, civic participation, and economic stability across our state. If elected, my goal would be to support policies that promote high standards, fiscal responsibility, transparency, and evidence-based decision-making while ensuring that students, educators, and institutions are supported to succeed. I am particularly interested in advancing education outcomes through strong governance, data-informed oversight, and collaboration with stakeholders across regions and communities. I view the role of a regent not as an administrator, but as a steward, one who balances innovation with tradition, autonomy with accountability, and statewide priorities with local needs. If entrusted with this responsibility, I would serve with independence, diligence, and unwavering commitment to public interest. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Francis, I thank you for your concise introduction. Very nice. What do you call home, sir?
I hail from the Caribbean, island of St. Lucia, which also is the same country island for the current Olympic female 100-meter champion. Proud to say that. Some Nobel laureates, of course, rest in peace, Sir Derek Walcott and Sir Arthur Lewis in economics. Made a lot of New York City, the Bronx, my home, a good bit of South Jersey, Mount Holly and Lumberton townships, and from 2018, pretty much the end of 2018, Albany has been my residence.
I'm sorry,
I
where?
said Albany has been my residence
Albany.
from the end of 2018.
Where in the Bronx did you live?
Beginning on Kingsbridge Terrace off Fordham Road,
Sure.
Cedric Avenue off Fordham Road, and pretty much my last location there was at Manor Avenue off Bruckner.
Having good Bronx credentials doesn't hurt you, sir.
I will take that as an endorsement, sir.
Senator Mayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. Thank you for coming forward. So as you know, the Regent's focus, and I'm the chair of the Senate Education Committee with my colleague, Mr. Benedetto, our focus is primarily on the Board of Regents' role in K through 12 education, setting policy, making recommendations about funding for public schools, a great deal of detail about how public schools and non-public schools work and are governed and how they are supported by the state of New York. In your resume, there's not a lot about K through 12 schools. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, either your own, your family, your interests, your activism? So where's your intersection in the education space?
All right. Thank you for that question, Senator Shelby. I would pause and reflect briefly, and one of the perspectives I believe I can bring to the Board of Regents is bringing a systems-based perspective shaped by experiences across financial, healthcare, security, facilities, operations, and information technology. Of course, much of my career has evolved and involved understanding how policy decisions translate into operational realities and where unintended consequences can arise if governance is not aligned with implementation. In addition, my academic background in economics and information technology allows me to evaluate policy decisions through both a fiscal and systems lens. I am particularly attentive to risk, compliance, data integrity, and sustainability areas that increasingly affect educational institutions. As a regent, I would focus on asking the right oversight questions, our standards being upheld, our resources being used responsibly, and our outcomes aligned with public expectations, especially for that very delicate K to 12.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. you know, right now, for us in the legislature, the governor has presented her budget, the Senate and Assembly are responding, and ultimately, we have to get to an agreed-upon balanced budget by the end of March. Have you followed any of the governor's recommendations with respect to either financing, change in education policy, any of the issues in the current dynamic between the Board of Regents and the governor, where they're not always on the same page about how schools should be paid and what the rules should be about both lower ed and higher ed? I just wonder if you're following that, or you're more reliant on your own professional experience to be sort of your guide in this.
Well, with most intent and immense interest, I am following. It would behoove me if I was not, given the current state of affairs with regards to education. I can also say that significant challenges in balancing budgets and access, quality, and sustainability across the education system is ensuring fiscal responsibility, maintaining academic standards, and addressing workforce alignment in regards to budget expectations, but most importantly, on-the-ground challenges that at times fiscal policies and fiscal boards and budgeting, as a person also who has an extensive financial background, that at times can be misperceived and misunderstood where it pertains to how to prioritize budget allocations where it is most needy serving, and not just in keeping with, I would say, fiscal priorities and alignment.
Thank you very, very much. I don't want to take up my time, but I appreciate your interest in the workforce and ensuring that students can enter the workforce prepared for the kinds of jobs that you have had involving complex management decisions. And I'm hopeful that you have thoughts about how to encourage that in our schools, career and technical education and other work preparedness skills that we need more help with.
Thank you, Senator.
Assemblywoman Hyman.
Thank you, Chair Benedetto. Mr. Francis, the Board of Regents sets overall education policy for the state of New York, and we're talking about about 7,000 public and private K through 12 schools, 248 public colleges, 251 proprietary schools. So you're talking about the entire education for the state of New York falls under the jurisdiction of the Board of Regents. That is no easy task. So what would you say are the top priorities that you feel the Board of Education the Board of Regents should be focusing on for this 26-27 academic year? So we're talking about all the students, whether in college or high school or elementary school, you would set policy for. What would be the top 3 things that you would look to shape in the state of New York?
Quite a daunting question, Assemblywoman Handman. I would most importantly look at the increasing importance of governance as it relates to standards for students, if we say from K-12 all the way up to all the colleges, setting standards that are not fluid in accommodating deficiencies, but maintaining a rigorous guideline or guidelines that all the levels from K-12 or K to 12 all the way through college would understand that the administrators do require that that standard be maintained first and foremostly in order to take us into the future of where the Board of Regents is needing institutions, educational institutions, to be and to go. Secondly, we have seen extreme shift, and it's so fluid that it's happening almost by milliseconds as far as infrastructure, information technology, artificial intelligence is really taking shape as the order of the day for learning from tertiary learning all the way through to the post-secondary level. And the need, it has become a very imminent need for all levels of education and educators alike, as well as the boards and standards, to really understand that there is an absolute need to be on that page and breaking into that space where competency will be the order of the day in comparison to the rest of the world.
Since you brought it up, would you want AI to be more regulated, or would you embrace it if you were to be a regent?
Well, we have been left with no other choice than to move in the direction that technology is so rapidly moving. But of course, we have observed when there are not, I would say, tight harnesses in regulation, what can be the outcomes. So a combination of, to answer your question, embracing with proper regulations and regulatory guidelines, absolutely. Thank you.
Senator Sravitsky, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, just very briefly. I chair the committee, I'm sorry, I need artificial intelligence, mine is lacking. I chair the Committee on Higher Education, and the regents do play a role. Basically, aside from the colleges and universities, we deal with the licensure of the professions as well as what they can do, what is referred to as the scope of practice. And the governor, in her recent executive budget, did outline quite a number of proposals, particularly in terms of scope of practice. Have you seen any of the sessions of the regents where these issues are discussed, or do you have any opinions or experiences with that?
While I have not had the opportunity to follow that particular space, but I am fully aware of the direction in which the Higher Education Board is trending, so to speak, and most importantly, where it pertains to licensure, we are at a crossroads where it is of paramount need and necessity to make sure that, as I say, almost dotting the i's and crossing the t's in regards to guidelines and of governance in relation to licensure, that we are not caught with our perceptions and requirements in a sort of snooze mode, but really taking a sort of lead by example as to how we would set the standards for the licensing commissions and the licensing boards and authorities to be in alignment with us on the higher education board, working in unison and unity to achieve the end goal for the next few years to come and the future.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Pirozzolo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Francis. How are you today?
Good yourself,
I'm
Assemblyman.
good, good. I have to tell you that I'm very happy to see that you're a data person. I think that is very important. As we spoke about a little bit earlier, that your resume doesn't reflect much of an educational background, but I'll let you know that I had zero educational background myself. If you want an educational background, you have children, I guess, and they will teach you everything they need you to know. So one of the things that the data shows is that there are many schools, I'm from New York City, there are many schools in New York City that do not perform very, very well. And I would be very interested, I'm going to give you a suggestion about maybe implementing some things that might change that data. Because year after year, we kind of do the same thing over and over again, and we don't really see different results. So I'm talking about recently up here of saying that maybe we should have an extended school year. I'm not talking about increasing in hours, the hours that the teachers spend. I'm talking about hiring additional personnel, or possibly extending the school day, where a lot of these after-school programs are incorporated into curriculum. Now that you have that idea, you have any thoughts on that, or would you be willing to at least have conversations as a regent on saying that maybe there are some possibilities there?
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman. Most certainly, I have quite a few ideas on that, especially most recently after completing my graduate studies. One of the channels and directions is in becoming an adjunct professor instructor. And one of the things that I am seeing even in those spaces of opportunities are the traditional curriculum that is still being recycled for information technology, data, science, data analysts, courses, even at the undergraduate and graduate level. And to support your perspective and view on the matter, I am in total agreement that an extended model of schools' curricula from high school level all the way through college should be one that should be seriously considered, because again, the rapid nature of data and its evolving is one that does not allow for falling behind in regards to being on track with how it's trending and how it's constantly changing. And so I have to support your idea and say that it's something that I have actually broached in conversation with regards to how we can, proceed in regards to closing and that gap, where it pertains to the whole data and technology space from that standpoint, Assemblyman. Yes, sir.
Mr. Francis, just a quick question here. One of the proposals that have been knocked around with the regents is to possibly require from every student before he graduates or she graduates from high school to make sure they have had at least one class, graduation credit in finance. I'll be interested in your opinions on that.
If I can go as organic as I can in regards to this question, I have two young adults now as children, but going back to when they were in high school in South New Jersey, one of the things I often emphasized was having mindfulness and awareness at teenage age or even before of the basic and fundamental aspect of finance and financial literacy, financial awareness is how to prioritize and understand simple spending and budgeting. And I would say observing them, observing their peers, there is a serious need for finance as a core requirement of graduation from high school, transitioning into the post-secondary college space that would benefit the whole country of future generation. Because what you see happening is people graduating, like my daughter, as a physician assistant and getting their first physician assistant paycheck, taking the expense along with student loans and buying or purchasing the first car that they feel is their choice. But
What if that car's a Corvette, sir? No, Mr.
and
Mr. Francis, point well taken.
Yes, sadly not understanding the full dynamics of what is at play, that when you buy a Honda HR-V, is the CVT part of that good in maintenance? Other than having to pay the note, you have to pay insurance, but a lot of times that generation just thinks, oh, I can afford the note. Yeah, but the note and the insurance and the oil and the gas is all part of your budget. And so that is the short-sightedness that is still at play. And I am praying that that can become a serious requirement to graduating from high school.
Mr. Francis, I thank you very much. And I thank you for coming up today and presenting yourself to us. I'm sure, speaking for the panel, we're all glad with your answers, and we respect what you've told us. And we will duly consider what you have told us today, and in the near future, you will be apprised of our decision. But thank you very much for your time, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you to the board and the chair and Senate members for having me. Have a good day.
Ms. Shorenstein, please, sit down and relax. Okay. I'm Assemblyman Michael Benedetto. I'm Chair of the Assembly Education Committee, and I'm sitting with the rest of our panel today. To my immediate right and going down the table is Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman, who's Chairman of the Assembly Higher Education Committee. Next to her is Senator Shelley Mayer, who's chairperson of the Senate Education Committee. And rounding out that side of the table is our chair of the Senate Higher Education Committee, Senator Toby Stavitsky. To my left is the ranking member, or representing the ranking member of the Assembly Education Committee, Assemblyman Sam Pirazzolla. Okay? What we're doing here is interviewing candidates for the regents, as you know, and what we simply do is we want to learn a little bit about you first, and we're going to give you some time, 5 minutes. You don't have to take all 5 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable with, and just have a dialogue and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we want you to relax, after which we will ask you a couple questions, okay, that are in our mind. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really grateful for it because I've been involved in education nearly all of my professional life, as you can see by my resume. Sure. Yes. I have worked at the local level at the New York City, at the time, Office of Education, the Department of Education, at the state level, at the Massachusetts Department of Education, and at the federal level. At the time I worked in Washington, it was still called the Office of Education, and transitioned to the Department of Education when I was there. I worked in K through 12. I worked at every level of K through 12, in vocational education, in very much in standard setting. I was involved in the writing of the No Child Left Behind Act, and I have been involved in higher education. I was the staff lead for the Wessel Commission many years ago, which was the future of higher education in the state of New York. And I was also the Dean of Academic Affairs at the Fashion Institute of Technology. So I have really spanned the entire scope of education. I'm a New Yorker. I was raised and went to the public schools of New York City, PS 166, Junior High School 118. My wonderful experience at the High School of Music and Art, which really carried me through in so many different ways. And I've had a deep commitment to equity and standards. You know, I read about the new Chancellor of the City of New York, who mentioned rigor and accessibility. And I have really worked for that my whole life. I worked at the College Board. I created a program that was the first of its kind in the country, that was a predecessor to advanced placement. I believe that every child should have the exposure to the quality of advanced placement, but without the preparation to do so, would not have that chance. And so I created a program called Pacesetter, which was integrated, which was offered in the middle schools, which allowed students to prepare in academic subjects for advanced placement courses. So that is one way in which you can integrate equity and quality. The program that I'm involved, that I'm leading now, Education Through Music, is a program that provides music education as a core subject to students who are underserved in under-resourced schools. Those students would have no access to music education were it not for the intervention of our program. And why do I tell you that with regard to accessibility and rigor? Because the music education provides an incentive for those students to go to school. It gives them a sense of pride, a sense of joy. And we have done a study done by an external evaluator that shows that they do far better in academic areas, particularly in language arts, English language arts, and mathematics, than their peers in comparable schools and from similar backgrounds in those areas, which shows that there are ways in which one can provide equity, even in Title I schools, and yet rigor by virtue of other interventions as well. In higher education, I have been involved in community colleges, which I see as a pathway to senior colleges. I do not see them as holding back access or advancement. I see them as a pathway. I think articulation agreements between community colleges and senior colleges need to be re-examined and continually strengthened. And I believe that all of these measures can allow for a pathway all the way from K-12, K through 12 through 16, K-16, that really keeps in mind the importance of really equity and standards. Finally, I do believe in high standards. I believe that those, and I worked, as I said before, on the No Child Left Behind Act, which in fact spoke to the issue of high standards. I believe they need to be provided to all students. I believe that and people should not be judged and thereby not offered high standards. I believe that students need to have supplemental services so that they can be as qualified as other students to be able to fulfill those high standards so that they can be productive and successful in life.
Thank you, Ms. Shorenstein. I applaud your desire for the arts and music, and I am well acquainted with education through music, having been a teacher myself and employed education through music in some of the schools in my district. But over and above that, however, I'll be interested in your views on how you continue to get kids interested in the arts and music and whatever, but at the same time, look at the financial side of education and look at the civics side of education. There are movements out there calling for time to instruct high school students in finance and grammar school students in civics. How do you mix all of these together and get a fine, well-rounded person in the confines of a school day?
That's the age-old problem that has faced us forever. I think, first of all, with regard to the finances, there need to be not-for-profit and public partnerships, as we do. We pay for the teachers. We pay for the development of the curriculum. And so it does not fall on the finances of the schools, which get their money from the state. We do it through private funding and through foundation funding. And I think there needs to be more of that. That's one part of your question, which is how do you finance it? And I do believe that increasingly corporations are getting involved in trying to provide certain parts of education that under-resourced schools cannot offer and that cannot be provided through the state budget. I do believe that the balance is important in a way that is maybe different than what you expect me to say, but I do think that there needs to be cross-subject integration. That's to say that in a civics course, you can talk about some of the backgrounds that other people come from in terms of the arts, in terms of literature, in terms of other things. In your math class, you can relate it in the case of, let's say, music, which I know best, to some of the rhythms and some of the discipline that you get through music. So I think that the integration, not integration so much, but the interrelationship of subject matter is very important, so that each not only is covered, but so that each is related to another area. And a child thereby, a student thereby, gets a much better sense of how things relate to one another.
Thank you. Senator Mayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I appreciate your commitment to seeing art and music. You know, in the Yonkers Public Schools, which I represent along with the leader, during the time of severe cutbacks, art and music were basically eliminated in K through, basically K through high school. Many teachers laid off, and no exposure at all. There's not a lot of requirement about art and music in the lower grades. There's an offering requirement in the high school. If you were on the Board of Regents, what would be your position about mandatory art and music in the lower grades, and particularly K through 5?
I don't know that I would make it mandatory. I know that one takes a risk by not making mandatory, but I feel that there are many schools. We're in 50 schools in New York City. There are many schools who will adjust the timing that they offer students, who will provide after-school programs, who will bring in a teacher on a basis that is affordable and doable, on an elective basis. They're not required to do so, and yet we find that 50 schools in New York City do it. In the Bronx, for example, which is the highest poverty area, we have the greatest concentration of our schools. 50% of our program is offered to areas in which accessibility is really, really critical. And why do we do it there? Because we see that students don't drop out of school. They love to come to school. They stay after school. They graduate from school. Their retention is high. And that can only contribute to their academic achievement. That can only contribute to their sense of achievement. So I would not make it mandatory. Despite my commitment to it, I went, as I said before, to the High School of Music and Art. But I would certainly work with schools to find alternative ways to build it into the curriculum. That's what I would do.
Second question is, as someone who is, your programs are in the New York City Public Schools. I don't know if you followed the Regents recommended a change in the foundation aid formula to benefit the New York City schools, regional cost index, and also additional weighting for homeless and foster youth. The governor did not put that in her budget, as you may know. What would be your feeling about the necessity of changing the formula to better serve the kids of New York City, even if the governor did not support it?
I think that the formula needs to be changed for many reasons. I think that the formula needs to be changed for migrant students.
For what? I'm sorry.
Migrant students.
Yes.
For homeless students. For students, I think we need greater attention on disabilities, frankly. But I think that it's a longer-term process. I don't think everything can be addressed simultaneously. I think there have to be priorities. I think consultation with neighborhoods and families and with local school boards could establish those priorities. But I know that the state formula puts an emphasis on math and on English and on smaller class size. I would say that those things are critical, but I would also say that there needs to be a plan that transitions that changes the formula over time to allow for some of these populations to be served.
Assemblywoman Hyman.
Thank you, Chair Benedetto. Ms. Shorenstein, I really like what you said about the community colleges having a pathway into the senior colleges. And as you probably know, in last year's cycle, we passed the CUNY and the SUNY opportunity programs that created a pathway for 25 to 55-year-olds to go back to school for a first-time college degree in nursing and other high-demand fields. This year, we expanded it to those individuals who maybe have a degree but want to go back to school for nursing, that they will be able to get the 2-year college degree in order to do that. So I think it's important when we talk about community colleges is that they are a gateway to be in for careers, for opportunities in the state of New York. Because of your background, there are several committees that, should you become a regent, you would be able to sit on. So I just wanted to know which committees would you be interested in? That's my first question, and then I'll come back with my second one.
My background is more familiar with K through 12, and although I've really, as I said, I was involved with the Wessel Commission that really laid a plan for the future of higher education in New York. My greatest experience is in K to 12, and that's where I would be interested in serving.
Okay. So being in a region, you would have oversight over 7,000 public schools, K to 12, over 250 colleges, public, private, and the proprietary school sector. And so in education, there are a myriad of issues, but if you had to say, based on your background, what should New York State be focusing on? If you want to give us your top 3, I'd be interested to hear what it is. Thank you.
My top 3 would be ensuring that high standards are met and finding the resources to ensure that. Secondly, my second highest priority would be teacher professional development. I strongly believe, and always have, that what goes on in the classroom depends on the teacher, and unless the teacher understands the social and emotional needs of students, the academic needs of students, the backgrounds from which those students come, they cannot fulfill the role that they need to play. I have advocated on behalf of expansive and progressive not in terms of ideology, but progressive in terms of the following steps for teacher professional development, from internships to mentorships to practice in the classroom, to a very, very rigorous understanding of the subject areas when they get further up that they need to teach. But I do believe that that is my second priority. My third priority really would be, in a way, accessibility, but to those with disabilities, those who have come from different backgrounds, migrant students, because I do believe that they will be part of the future of this country, and I also do feel that that would be my third.
Senator Stravitsky.
There we go. Thank you for coming up to Albany in this cold weather. It'll be warm when the regents meet, so at least I hope so.
Do you only meet in the summer?
I am delighted that you mentioned the community colleges in your opening remarks, and Assemblymember Heineman and I are in total agreement with the importance of the community colleges. They often are the largest employers in many of the counties throughout the state, particularly in terms of economic development and workforce development. And the Assembly member described some of the initiatives that the governor has put in her budget the last couple of years for community colleges, particularly the Reconnect program that she described. These are really, to me, important programs, and I wonder if you have any feelings on how it can be expanded to include more participants, things that we can do. And I must say, it's the legislature working together with the governor and the regents that these programs are being developed. But how do you see the regions going beyond this particular area?
I think the regions has to be the enabler of public and private partnerships. I know this has been said for a long time in New York. I do believe that these programs can be expanded if certain certain corporations pick up some of the training under the supervision of what it is that needs to be taught. I've seen that in other places. I've seen that in other countries, as a matter of fact. And these are not just apprenticeships. They are internships, and they allow for a collaboration and a partnership that can expand the opportunities for students to get involved in certain fields. That does not mean that you compromise the academic component of the students' experience. But I do believe that these partnerships between the private sector, and we have so many areas in New York State where students can really participate in industry, in corporations, that with that partnership, there's an opportunity, not necessarily to finance, but to certainly have corporations and industry finance the opportunity for students to learn something about the fields that they're going into. So that would be the way that I would address that issue of expansion.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Pirazzolla.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming in today. I like the fact that you're heavily involved with, I guess, K to 12.
I am.
I'm from New York City. I was a former school board member. I had put 2 children through the public education system, so to speak. The data shows us that many of our schools, particularly in New York City, the students are not performing at grade level for reading, writing, mathematics. In some cases, it's 95% of the school that are not doing that. So as a region, what suggestion or guidance, or would you say to them that, listen, what we've been doing for decades, historically actually, has not changed? Would you consider introducing anything, or what ideas do you have that could be introduced that may change those outcomes without pointing blame at an individual group as far as why those circumstances may exist?
I believe that teachers need to be held more accountable. I feel that that needs to be done through school boards and through the union. I believe that there need to be master teachers that can facilitate teachers really being able to raise the level of instruction that exists in some of our schools. I believe that, and I mentioned this before, that those students who start out, first of all, I believe in early childhood education to lay the fundamentals and in early grades. And I do believe that there need to be supplemental services provided for students who initially are not able to grasp the subject matter. So it's a two-pronged process. I believe that more teacher education needs to be provided and teachers are held accountable for implementing those standards and not watering down what goes on in their classroom. And I believe, secondly, that there needs to be supplemental services provided to students that they would be able to learn from, that could help them in their.
Another question, if I may. What is your opinion on specialized high schools?
I went to a specialized high school.
I'm sorry?
I went to a specialized high school. I believe in specialized high schools, for better or worse, if that's accepted or not. I believe in specialized high schools because I believe that part of our responsibility is to nurture people who have certain talents, skills, levels of understanding of literacy so that they can be leaders. And when we degrade that opportunity or eliminate that opportunity or reduce it, we are not providing for those people who can help other people, who can serve as mentors, who can serve as leaders in other ways with students, who can serve as examples to them, but I do believe in specialized high schools.
And just one more, if I may. I'm trying to float the idea of an extended school year, possibly an extended school day. I'm not saying that individual teachers would have any increased workload. I'm talking about hiring new teachers. I'm not saying that a student is going to be sitting in front of a blackboard or a monitor for 16 hours a day. I'm talking about integrating after-school programs into the curriculum. And part of the reason is maybe that financial aspect you were talking about. A lot of our after-school programs always have to come up here and they ask us for money. Do we give them money? And do they get money? Do they not get money? And I feel that if it was incorporated into the curriculum, maybe that would be more stable. You're talking about bringing in outside corporations, so I don't know the stability of that income. But I certainly feel that if we were able to extend our school year, not increasing the amount of days in front of a teacher, not necessarily, but we would eliminate that gap of summer school, that when students come back to school, they have forgotten so much that, we take many months just to train them again. So what would you think of some sort of conversation, at the very least, about that?
I think that it needs to be optional. I think that summer programs do exist, and unfortunately, it's self-selective. Those who want more do take advantage of it. I have seen after-school programs really work, both in the academic areas as well as in other areas. I don't see it as an after-school program. I see it as an extended day program. Do the teachers want to do it? There's some teachers who, and you all won't necessarily agree with me on this, but there's some student teachers who, if given the opportunity, can handle after-school programs so that it's not necessarily decided by the union, but it's a pre-union situation. And they are people who are going to schools of higher education in teaching, and those might be the people who could serve at a lesser cost to the state in terms of after-school programs and summer programs.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Mr. Pirazzolla asked about the specialized high schools. Okay, but the question might be, should admission to those specialized high schools be mandatory, yet you have to take a test? That's the question.
I would say that we need to improve our elementary and middle school education so that everybody really is able to go to a specialized school. I think that the teacher recommendation is far more important than a test. I worked for the College Board, so I know what testing can do, and it sometimes is not discriminatory but limiting. But I do think teacher recommendations and grades in school are far more indicative of a student's ability than taking a test to get into high school. So I do believe in those schools because I do believe that they can foster leadership. I do believe that entry into them should be done on much less rigorous manner, much more related to what the student has already shown in the classroom rather than something that is standardized.
Ms. Shorenstein, I thank you very much for your answers. I thank you for coming here today and presenting and answering our questions here today. We will certainly, consider them, and you will be notified in the near future as to what's going on here. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to each of you for your questions. I appreciate them, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And with that, this ends day one of the Regents' interviews. Day two will begin tomorrow at 10 o'clock.